Hi, my name is Ryan, and I'm a spokesperson for Ontario School Safety. I'm also a biomedical engineering graduate and current engineering PhD candidate funded by a National Sciences and Engineering Research Council of Canada graduate scholarship, as well as an Engineering Excellence doctoral fellowship from the University of Waterloo. Today, I'll be presenting about the topic of carbon dioxide monitoring on the school bus. So, improving indoor air quality in schools is critical to keeping kids safe. But it's also important not to forget about the school bus. I'm going to spoil the ending of this presentation for you, though. The CO2 on buses can be 3 times higher than recommended because buses don't have ventilation systems. However, we can implement practical solutions starting tomorrow to keep kids healthy and drivers safe and working. So, a school bus is many positive things. For some students, the school bus is their only option for transportation to and from school. It's a space where they spend a considerable amount of time each day, and it's a very safe method of transportation of kids. It's also often considered an extension of the classroom, which is a fascinating comparison to make. Because while classrooms should aim for 6 or more air changes per hour and less than 1,000 parts per million of CO2 at any given time, a bus can experience less than one-third of those air changes and over 3,000 parts per million of CO2. For comparison, fresh outdoor air is only around 400 parts per million. So, what is happening on the school bus? Let's take a look. You could think of a bus as a portable on wheels, but without a system to bring in fresh air for everyone. CO2 builds up quickly because of the low ceilings, making the bus a small chamber. If the windows are closed, that chamber is now tightly sealed. There is no mechanical ventilation bringing in fresh, filtered air, and the CO2 builds as more kids board the bus. So, if upgrades are made to a classroom air quality, but nothing is done for the school bus, the extension of the classroom, this is inequitable for students who take the bus. High levels of CO2 increase our health risks like tiredness, headaches, dizziness, and concentration difficulties. We can all agree that this is not a great way to feel at the start of a school day, and no one wants to be behind the wheel of a school bus when feeling dizzy or having difficulty concentrating, especially when transporting children. High levels of CO2 also mean inhaling other people's exhaled air. For example, at 1,200 parts per million, every 1 in 50 breaths you take is rebreathed air. Think about it like drinking from a cup of water after a kid has just taken a sip. And imagine the crayons in this image are inhalable illnesses. But instead of being contained to a cup that you can choose not to drink from, those illnesses are floating freely in the air around you. You have much less control, and your engineers are responsible for ensuring your cup, I mean, your indoor air, doesn't contain illnesses. Many illnesses float in the air. I'm sure you've seen the recent news about measles outbreaks and the doubling of invasive strep A cases in areas like the Waterloo region, which is when the bacteria invade areas like the bloodstream and various organs. Catching viruses is not good for kids' immune systems, and we don't want our bus drivers constantly off sick either, letting down the students and their families who depend on them. We must also safeguard the long term health of students and drivers. For example, measles can eventually lead to blindness, deafness, and permanent neurological damage. Strep can cause kidney and heart damage, and sepsis, where survivors of sepsis often suffer persistent immune, brain, and blood vessel dysfunction. COVID-19 also causes blood vessel and neurological damage, and Statistics Canada recently showed that each COVID-19 infection increases the risk of experiencing long term symptoms like fatigue, shortness of breath, and brain fog. We don't want this to happen to any of our kids or their bus drivers. Who is liable for kids' safety if their bus driver is experiencing these symptoms? So, measles is a highly contagious, inhalable virus that can remain infectious in the air for up to 2 hours after someone has left the room. The virus that causes COVID 19 can infect someone within 6 to 37 minutes of breathing in a room. A bus ride is certainly longer than 6 minutes. So, to remember how high risk the school bus is, you can use the acronym FIT. Frequency refers to loading and unloading the bus from Monday to Friday. Intensity refers to loading mixed classes of students close together and generating illness particles in CO2 when singing, shouting, laughing, and talking. And time refers to sitting shoulder to shoulder for 20 to 30 minutes in a seat where it's difficult to get sufficient clean airflow because the backs of the seats are too high. I'm sure by now you understand the issue with high CO2 and the need to stop illnesses from going round and round on the bus. But don't despair, we do have the tools to create a happier ending. Here's what we could do tomorrow. Open the windows and the roof hatches. This was recommended in 2021 by Public Health and can reduce CO2. This can help for tomorrow, but there remains exposure to vehicle emissions and pollution, which is not good for academic performance or the lung and the heart health of young kids and drivers. You might also say, Ryan, it's too cold to open a window during a Canadian winter. The kids will freeze. To which I would reply, if the bus is being warmed and there is a temperature difference between the indoor and the outdoor air, this means that you only need to open the windows just a bit to draw out that CO2, maybe 5 to 6 centimeters opening. This is enough to draw out the CO2, but only will drop the temperature on the bus by a couple of degrees. Maximizing the fresh air defroster fan speed at the front of the bus can also increase fresh air intake for the driver. Again, this is a short-term solution. The filters in these systems are not MERV 13 or HEPA grade, and it isn't sufficient for all of the passengers on the bus. We also need to think longer term. What could we do after tomorrow? Well, for starters, we can provide and request respirators to be worn that filter the inhaled and the exhaled air. These aren't your typical surgical or cloth masks. In fact, in Canada, we have a new engineering standard for comfortable respirators that meet safety, filtration, fit, and breathability requirements. And they come designed for school aged kids up to adults. Now, respirators won't address high CO2 levels because carbon dioxide is a gas that can pass freely through respirators, but they will filter pollutants and illnesses because of the stickiness of the fiber materials on a molecular level and static electricity. And to answer your question, no, if you touch a respirator, you won't get sick. Any illness is stuck within those fiber layers, and the evidence shows that the risk of transmission from a respirator to someone's skin is negligible. We could also advocate for real-time school bus CO2 monitoring. The graph on the right shows time series data of CO2, and these two highest peaks show an Ontario student's 15-minute bus ride to and from school, well above the 1,000 part per million threshold. Continuous monitoring is crucial to understanding risk and the volume of clean air being supplied to a space. Here's how you can use CO2 to understand your risk. At 2,500 parts per million on the bus, about 1 in 20 breaths contain others' exhaled air. That's like drinking 380 milliliters of water containing someone's backwash, or almost one bottle of water that could contain viruses every minute. Let's say the time spent on the bus to and from school is 20 minutes. That's about 15 bottles of water contaminated with someone's backwash if we're not cleaning the air. If 1 in 12 Ontarians have COVID-19, as they did back in January 2024, according to Dr. Tara Moriarty's COVID-19 Resources Canada group, and there are 30 kids on the bus, the chances of at least one person being infected is about 90%. And at 2,500 parts per million of CO2, those 15 bottles of backwash would be unsafe to drink. Here's an example of 3,000 parts per million on the bus, and other measurements have reached beyond 4,000 or even 8,000 parts per million on hour-long bus rides to camps and other school activities. We can also advocate for technological investments. This may include installing portable air filtering units and UVC disinfection, installing ventilation systems to supply clean, fresh air, and electrifying school bus fleets to reduce pollutants that can leak into the bus. These investments should have been made years ago. Every single time someone is negatively impacted by high CO2 or infected on a bus, whether it be a kid, a driver, an educator, or a caregiver, is a significant failure of a school bus to be a safe mode of transportation. In 2021, Dr. Bonfleth, the chair of the ASHRAE Epidemic Task Force, made this comment. I want to highlight where he says MERV 13 filter efficiency should be viewed as a baseline requirement on a school bus, and that the best technology we have to supplement ventilation and filtration is disinfection with ultraviolet light. The information from this presentation is available in a short infographic on our website, ontarioschoolsafety.com. You can find this and other resources to help advocate for clean air in schools, including presentations about indoor air quality in schools and information letters that can be shared with other caregivers and educators. The resources from this presentation are included here, and you can get in contact with Ontario School Safety through our various channels. If you liked this presentation and you want to support our efforts, please consider donating to our GoFundMe to help us in our mission to protect Ontario students, education workers, and bus drivers who deserve to breathe clean air in schools and on school buses. Thank you.